Idlis, Ullakkai Guperi. Trump openly says, I want the oil. Finished. It's all about oil. Torans of various sorts, bean toran, cabbage toran. Today, if there is at all a similar rivalry, it's US and China. And how do we not take a side when China is sitting on our borders? So don't do what this IIT guy did. I have walked through minefields in Bosnia, but I can tell you that my first election was tougher. Nobody, not even Marunadu Malayalis like you guys, were willing to spend any money in Kerala. But then there were other moments in life when I took some seemingly reckless decisions. I still went down in the annals of the Congress history as the most successful loser ever. I'm a very easy person to feed.
First of all, thank you all for coming together to celebrate the birthday of Dr. Tharoor.
Not really, but anyway, that was Arun's mischief. One of 3 birthdays anyway.
One of 3 birthdays. So before we start out, we just wanted to tell you we are incredibly grateful that we got the opportunity to host you because
very kind, thank you.
Because you are someone everyone looks up to, especially amongst, if you think about the teens in India, the teens abroad, everyone truly looks up to you, the adults as well. We've got 20 minutes, and rather than make this a formal Q&A about policy, which you likely get every place, our hope is that over the next 20 minutes, we'll be able to download nuggets from your brain and see the person behind the persona.
Okay.
So as we go through this, if you could maybe sprinkle in a few stories about your life, that really would help us understand who you truly are.
Oh my God, all right. Very worrying.
So with that, I'll start out with something pretty basic, which is decision making. So if you look back at your life, what were maybe 1 or 2 decision pathways that initially when you took it, it might have seemed risky, but it compounded in ways that you couldn't have imagined. Like what way were there any, and as you kind of went through life, how did that process change? And right now, what do you kind of dismiss right away versus what is it that you give importance to? So the process, how did it change?
Well, I'd say throughout my life, there have been 2 guiding stars on decisions. One was rational analysis to the best of my ability and to the best of the information available as to what the choices were. And then going with my own instinct on the basis of rational analysis. Now, sometimes a lot of things seemed, as a student, for example, I remember in those days we had 11 years of schooling, not 12. And so at the end of class 8, there was an aptitude test and they streamed you into science or humanities. And I had just been one of those kids who was inconveniently good at taking exams all my life. So I'd come first and everything, but when the test was taken, I just chose humanities throughout. And my teachers are so upset, they summoned my parents to the school and said, why does our best science student want to do humanities? And my parents, who being good Malayali middle-class parents, assumed that their son should be a doctor or an engineer. So they weren't terribly happy with this either. And they said, what's the matter with you? Why don't you do this? And I said, I can't stand the subject. My father said, don't be silly. You've come first in it throughout. And I said, but that's only because I know how to write the exam. The day after the exam, I've forgotten everything I studied for it because I don't really care about science. But if you were to ask me questions about history or literature, going well beyond anything I've been taught in school, I'll be able to answer them because I read extensively and widely, because that's what interests me. And to my father's credit, in those days, he said, all right, do what you want. And then the same pattern repeated itself 2 or 3 times. I got the highest possible marks in the country at the end of school leaving examinations, or what was called senior Cambridge in those days, when our exam papers used to be shipped off to Cambridge to be corrected and so on. And anyway, we got the marks, the results, and I had aced everything. So the assumption, if you had done humanities and had done very well, is that you would do economics, because that was the tough thing to get into unless you had very high marks. I opted for history, and again, upset what you're going to do with history. You'll be a teacher or something, whereas with economics you could have gone off and become a big executive in a multinational corporation, whatever it was. And again, I was able to prevail. I became the only person admitted to St. Stephen's College without an interview because they'd never seen anyone with my marks applying for history. And the same story occurred a third time at the end of college when again I topped the university in history and my father said, look, at least take the IIM exams. There were only 2 IIMs in the country in those days, Ahmedabad and Calcutta. So I took them and I came first in one and second in the other. And again, I said, I'd rather go to America and study international affairs, international politics. My parents shook their heads, but my father fortunately always had the conviction it's his life. He's the one who has to look forward to going to work in the morning. Let us not saddle him with something that fulfills our wishes rather than his. And I think that was a very, very good yardstick. I followed the same principle as a father myself. Let the children follow their bliss. But then there were other moments in life when I took some seemingly reckless decisions. They didn't work out in the ways I would have hoped, but they worked out in other ways. I mean, the most perhaps important one of that was when I accepted an invitation to contest for Secretary General of the UN from the government of India without really having had any sense of how strongly the government would actually pursue their offer. Yep. And they didn't, I think, do as much as they might have been able to do to support the campaign. And because some boxes were not ticked, particularly with the Americans, I lost. Okay. And I lost narrowly because there were 7 candidates, including foreign ministers, deputy prime ministers, a crown prince, and the president of a country, but I still managed to come second. But still, second, as Groucho Marx would say, is no cigar. So that was that. And suddenly, at the age of 51, I was ending a career that I'd expected to be in for the rest of my working life and wondering what to do with myself. But somehow, it landed on my feet. I was offered a sort of consultant type arrangement that carried a fairly hefty pay packet, so at least I was immediately making more than I was as an Undersecretary General of the UN. But money was never a motivation for me, or I would have done those IIMs and those Hindustanized multinationals. Instead, I ended up writing, speaking. But then in America, you also get paid for speeches. So suddenly I never used to charge for a speech in my UN days, but suddenly I was getting, in those days, 20 years ago, $50,000 a pop. So 10 speeches, I was making more than, I had an agency representing me by then, but I was making more than I would have as a UN salaried employee. So it could have been a comfortable life. But again, I wasn't looking for a comfortable life. I missed the sense of involvement with something larger than myself that I'd always had at the UN days. In the UN, I had been handling refugee crises. I had led the team dealing with peacekeeping in the former Yugoslavia. I had run a huge department and reformed it. I had been a right-hand man to the Secretary General and accompanied him in meeting presidents and prime ministers and heads of state. And I missed that. So when, in the middle of all this rather comfortable life, I was going back to India regularly because part of the idea was to explore investment opportunities in India. And I was particularly looking at Kerala, but nobody, not even Marunadu Malayalis like you guys, were willing to spend any money in Kerala because you were convinced the red flags would come out and your money would be lost. So it was a tough task, but while I was doing that, I met the political leadership regularly because I knew them all when I was at the UN and they visited New York. So there was some connection there. And when, to my surprise, I was asked, would you like to contest? I said no without even thinking about it. And I tell you, it objectively was a totally bad decision because I had left India when I was 19 and the voting age was 21 in those days. So I had never voted in an election, never seen one up close, never been in a political party from the inside, and had no clue what it would take to actually contest an election. So I was, in a sense, objectively nuts to say yes. And no sooner was my candidacy announced than my own party people started burning my effigy in Trivandrum because I was an unwelcome interloper into what they had thought was going to be destined for them. So it was a tough thing to get into. I had walked through minefields in Bosnia, but I can tell you that my first election was tougher, much tougher. But at the end of all of that, I survived, and the knives came out for me after my victory.
Yes.
Within a year, I was completely sort of 6 foot under.
Yeah.
People assumed my career was over before it had even begun. But somehow I found it in me to stick through. I mean, I just didn't feel that I was going to allow myself to surrender so easily to the various and rather formidable forces arraigned against me from both the inside and the outside. And I stuck it out, and I survived. And what's more, I won 4 elections.
Yeah.
And I've not lost any so far, other than...
Yeah. So you,
other than the other foolish decision was to decide to run for president of the Congress Party.
okay.
And the reason I did that was also partly idealism and partly naivete. I thought I could contribute something that would transform the fortunes of the party. We had lost
Yep.
2 elections, the election of 14 and the election of 19, rather badly with no significant uptick in our fortunes. So when an election was to be called in 22, I thought this was a chance to actually contribute a different vision, a different approach. I still went down in the annals of the Congress history as the most successful loser ever. Nobody had got as many votes as I have.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, again, people thought this was not the rational thing to do, because once the other nomination came up, there was one more candidate in the fray, Digvijay Singh. He promptly withdrew. He said, now the writing is on the wall, this is the destined winner. But I didn't like the sound of that. I just felt that if you're having an election, you've declared a thing, and various people, 60 relatively idealistic people around the country had risked their position in the party to sign my nomination forms. I wasn't going to let them down. So I got a call from Mr. Kharge saying, will you pull out? And I said, no. I said, let's fight it through. And, I have enormous respect for you. I won't say anything negative about you, but I have a different vision from you, and I'll articulate it. Now, at the end of it all, the party actually was able to say to the world, look, we're the only democratic party in the country because we had an election. So in the end, some people got some good out of it.
So talking about BJP and Congress, something that we caught, like as you were giving the various instances of how you took the path that was unexpected, was how it took you through different pathways of power. And so that's the next question really about power, because if we from the outside look at your career, you've seen a lot of changes in the world from the Cold War, you've lived through globalization, digital age, and now it's the era of AI, right? So what disruption changed your understanding of power the most? And is there some place where you saw the old rules essentially break down? And in this context, when you think about Indian youth, because you spoke a lot about how you were as a student and your passion for humanities, how do you think about what's the durable opportunity for Indian students over the next decade, especially in this era of AI where everything seems to be getting automated?
Yeah, well, I should stress with no false modesty that I've never had power. I've had access to power or proximity to power, but never had power myself, which will probably be the one regret I will have to take at the end of my career, because in many cases I came close, but it didn't quite work out. But what I saw of power, I think first the most revelatory moment was not any disruptive technology. We're just seeing humanity at work. It was when I was with Kofi Annan, I was often accompanying him on meetings with just a world leader plus one or something like that. And I saw maybe 50, 60, 70 heads of state at very close quarters. I've had lunch with Boris Yeltsin. I've rubbed shoulders with Tony Blair, or rubbed knees, literally, because the sitting room in Downing Street is so completely tiny that you literally would rub your knees against the guy sitting opposite you, who was Tony Blair at the time, as Prime Minister. I've met Putin. I've met all the 4 American presidents of my time, the 2 Bushes, Clinton, Obama. And all I can say is that it's a very quick discovery when you see them in a sort of not in the grand setting of fanfare and pomp, or even on television where they're performing, but you see them inside behind closed doors in a conference, you realize they're ordinary human beings like the rest of us. Circumstances have given them a certain power and authority, but they are really no better, no different from any of us. And that was for me a startling realization that there is nothing, they're not extra special gifted human beings as far as I could tell. They've mastered the art of rising to a particular position in their systems. And it'll be different systems will produce different kinds of people prevailing. But I've never felt awed anymore in the presence of so-called greatness, because that greatness is what we ascribe to them from the positions that they have achieved. And so we are all, in a sense, as capable or as incapable. We may have better strengths, better weakness, fewer weaknesses, whatever, than some of them. But they're all like us, and that was one big revelation. I think the two major changes that I saw in terms of the way power is exercised, the first would have been the communications revolution of the early 90s when satellite TV first came on board. I was sitting in the UN Security Council where we were following the traditional approach. Some incident would happen in Bosnia or whatever. We would send an urgent message asking for an account of what had happened. The general would have to get back from that crisis spot to his headquarters, dictate or write a cable, which would then be typed up and sent. And a few hours after the incident, I would get that cable, and then I would be in a position to summarize it and give a report to the UN Security Council. But we were suddenly facing a world for the first time in which the ambassadors we were speaking to had already seen the event live on real-time television in their offices before my general had even got back to the headquarters to draft his cable of an authoritative account. We were already getting questions from people who believed they knew what had happened because they'd seen it on TV. But the TV version may not have been the complete picture, but he would not have understood what our general's point of view was. But it was a big struggle. Suddenly the way the sort of collapsing or the telescoping of time and distance that took place from the early 90s was the first major change. I imagine that the second change that you signaled in your question about AI is beginning to unfold now. It's probably too early to show an impact in the domains that I am talking about, geopolitics, world affairs, and so on. It is at the moment working dramatically in other areas. But it will definitely affect us. Right now, it's a superficial effect of fake news clips and doctored videos and so on. Those have already come about. But now everyone and his brother seems to be aware that this is possible. And so if somebody says, well, that's not me, that's really fake, they're more prepared to believe it. And not all of them are very well done. Just recently, I was a victim of one where some Pakistanis took a genuine clip of me talking to an Indian journalist as I was coming out of Parliament, in fact, sitting in my car because I already had my leg hurt by then, and talking through the window, and they just put completely different words into my mouth. But the accent and the language were not mine. And anybody with slight degree of discernment, and unfortunately is not everyone, but anyone with a slight degree of discernment would realize it was fake. But and I just was able to dismiss it immediately. I just didn't even bother to check what impact it would have because no one was demanding explanations from me because they knew it was fake. But there will be other things where they will get better at this, where they may actually get actual clips of my voice off the internet, of which there are thousands, and actually clone a voice and then have me say things that I would never say. And even if in a day or two I can dispel it and prove it wasn't me,
the reputational
in that the damage will already have been done. So those are some of the dangers that I can see happening. And of course, you could actually see wars being triggered off by this. Imagine if a world leader of a particular country is depicted saying something that he'd never said, but a country that is already teetering on the brink of contemplating war with that country sees this and just triggers off a reaction. And then by then it's too late to stop. So these things could happen. I don't think it's happened yet, but it could happen.
Got it. Okay. So if I could just, go to the narrative of geopolitics, India's standing when it comes to the world powers. So what we are seeing right now, it seems to be a breakdown of the old norm, and something new is coming up. So from your vantage point, your perspective, like we have a lot to be proud of. We are the largest democracy, we have history, we exemplify unity in diversity, and but at this moment where globalization, it's literally fragmenting into blocks, what's our structural competitiveness in the next order, which is still shaping up, like as we all know. But from your vantage point, just given the fact that you've had so many experiences across the world, you have sat in rooms that none of us can even, imagine. How do you think of that framework? What's India's true competitiveness? And in that frame, where does Kerala fit in?
Mm-hmm. So it's a good question and a complicated one to give you a simple answer to it. I'm reminded of a statement by Antonio Gramsci, the sociologist and commentator in the 1920s, who wrote after the First World War that the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to be born. In some ways, that applies very much to our time. The assumptions of the post-World War II era for about 8 decades, those assumptions are collapsing everywhere. And yet at the same time, we don't know yet what might replace it. We created a world of multilateral systems, the United Nations, benevolent aid programs to help countries grow out of poverty and so on. It actually, when you look back, it will look like a far better period of world history than we realized when we were living it, from roughly 1945 to roughly 2015. But since then, there are all sorts of disquieting things happening. You had a backlash against globalization, which has created now protectionist barriers between countries and other countries. You have the abandonment of global systems like the World Trade Organization may as well be dead because no one is using it. Countries are busy instead having bilateral treaties and bilateral agreements with countries to trade. You're finding old alliances are fraying. Trump suddenly seems to be prepared to attack a NATO country to capture Greenland. He's backed off from that, but that kind of thing would have been unthinkable in the era I was talking about. There's one day Trump tweeting about G2 with China, the two of them dividing up the world and running it. The next day he's talking about tariffing China. He's one day talking about making peace with Putin. The other day he's sanctioning those countries who buy oil from Putin. There's a lot of unpredictability and uncertainty and turbulence amid all of this. So it's not easy to give you a clear idea. Are we going to end up with a world of competing blocks? A Western bloc, an Eastern bloc, 2 Eastern blocs, if Russia goes separate from China, a global South that India hopes to try and lead. Very, very unclear. And I don't know whether we'll end up in a G2 where America and China divide up the world, because they are the two countries now with comparable economies, comparable militaries, comparable size. Russia is no longer in that game in quite the same way that China and America are. Could it be anarchy? Could it be literally a law of the jungle situation where the only rule is that there are no rules, and whoever has the clout, the strength, the muscle, the power, they call their shots? I mean, that's what Trump just showed us in Venezuela, right? You have international law, you have certain principles. In the old days, if an American president had wanted to do this, he would have had to justify it in the name of democracy promotion or human rights or some good language that upholds some international principle in the name of which he's doing. Trump openly says, I want the oil. Finished. It's all about oil. He didn't even return the Nobel Prize winning democracy activist to Venezuela. He said, no, I mean, we'll continue with the old guy's number 2. Let her run the country and give me the oil. That's as blunt as that. That's not what any of us had understood by the principles of international affairs. The old principle of respect for sovereignty was already discarded with many, many attacks in many countries in the first decade, whether America attacking Iraq or other countries attacking Libya, Tunisia, Syria. You had now the Ukraine war. All of these are big countries basically saying, we will do it despite the laws because we can. We're strong enough to do it. And now it's no longer about what kind of restraints countries will use. It's whether you can raise the cost for them to attack you. One of the reasons I've become a strong advocate of more defense expenditure in India is not because I want to go to war. I'm the least bloodthirsty person you can find. But because I fear that if we look weak, if we look as if we don't have all of this stuff, then the Chinese and the Pakistanis, or worse still, the two of them together,
Yep.
will decide India is vulnerable now, let's take it.
Let's take it.
What we want.
Yeah.
Whether it's Kashmir for the Pakistanis or Arunachal for the Chinese or whatever. Now, the only way we can prevent that is by showing we're not vulnerable. That the costs that we could inflict on them for doing that makes it not worthwhile to do it. So that's the posture I would be at today. Now, that's on the broader first question you asked. On the second thing of India's role and Kerala's role. India's role, I think, at the moment is best summarized in this notion of multi-alignment, which is a term I came up with 20 years ago. It was not well received at the time, but subsequently, I'm pleased to say the present government has adopted it, and Mr. Jayashankar uses it quite a bit. And it's a phrase which basically talks about the fact that the world today is increasingly like the world of the internet, the world of the World Wide Web, where I may be connected to you for this, and you may be connected to him for something else, but I may not be connected to him because there's no mutual interest that we need to be connected for. But the possibility of establishing the connection is always there. And this kind of multi-networked world gives you not non-alignment, but multi-alignment, where you're basically saying that we will be connected to wherever we have something to gain and something to contribute, and where others want us to contribute and others want to give us, and vice versa. Now, that's the first broad orientation. I know that's a very vague sounding answer. I think in specific terms, India has a couple of choices it has to make. It talks of itself as the voice of the global south, but on a number of issues now, its stand has been different from all the countries of the global south. For example, it has been fairly strongly pro-Israel, including on the Gaza thing, because it sees, or the present Indian government feels that the biggest threat to India is Islamist terror, and Israel feels the same way, and therefore we can share information, share intelligence, buy defense equipment, all of that, and therefore we have some affinity with them. So that has meant that our historic commitment to the Palestinian cause has been diluted to some degree. And in the process, we have not been speaking out against some Israeli actions, whereas every other country in the global south has been doing so. So how do we suddenly say we are from the global south and we are the voice of the global south if our voice is not saying what the rest of the global south is saying? Question to which at the moment there are no answers. We are talking about the global south in terms of development and those kinds of paradigms, but not in geopolitics. The other thing is, in this situation, how did non-alignment evolve? Because there were two big superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States and their allies respectively. And we were safely far enough away from both that we could navigate a middle course, and we said we don't want to be aligned with either. But the problem is that today, if there is at all a similar rivalry, it's US and China. And how do we not take a side when China is sitting on our borders and nibbling away at our territory? Now, there are still 2 points of view. There is a point of view that says, let's go off and make common cause with America, short of signing a formal alliance. Let's do everything possible with the West, because that will be our security against China. But there's another point of view that says that precisely because China is sitting on your borders and can do you so much harm, and also has the means to do you a lot of good because of all the equipment that they produce, even the machinery that we use to manufacture items for export, that machinery comes from China. It's cheaper than from anywhere else in the world. Why don't we make common cause with China instead? We're closer to them. We don't have to make them an enemy. We can make them a friend. But the friend would be on very unequal terms, and some of us find that rather troubling, because obviously we would end up being essentially a vassal or a satellite of China. So all of these things are yet to play themselves out. Different choices may need to be made at different times. But right now, we are dancing around all the questions I've raised, and the questions are still being asked. There is no real answer yet. Kerala?
Yes.
Kerala, I believe, is ripe for a serious revolution in mindset. But whether either of our parties is capable of bringing that about is as... your guess is as good as mine. I feel that I've written this now. I've written half a dozen articles in the last 6-7 months about why Kerala cannot afford to continue this way. The Kerala growth model has become a Kerala debt model. We're the second most highly indebted state in the country. We have become essentially bankrupt. The state government runs out of government money by September and borrows money every year to pay even government salaries, Onam bonuses, all that are paid by borrowed money, which means the debt keeps going up and up and up, spiraling upwards. Today, 55% of the government's expenditure is on debt servicing and pension payments, so completely unproductive expenditure. and therefore money available for new projects, for development, for new initiations of anything, innovations, zero. I mean, not zero literally, but close to zero metaphorically. In those circumstances, the obvious question to ask is, how do we overcome this? You need more revenue. Where do you get the revenue from? Kerala, it's already the highest state taxes in India. You can't tax them anymore because they're already paying the highest property tax, the highest stamp duty, the highest sales tax. I mean, you name any tax that a state government has the discretion to give, the Keralats are paying the most. So taxes are not the answer. What the answer will be clearly is to open up the state dramatically to business and invite businesses to come in and make it easy for them. Now, for that, there are two major challenges. The first is because we have had a long history of driving businesses out of Kerala, thanks to militant trade unionism and the famous red flags. A lot of businesses don't want to come in. I found this out the hard way when I was spending that year and a half between the UN and getting into politics, 2 years. I was literally trying to drum up investment. And it was crazy. At my own expense, I hosted a dinner in New York for the then Industries Minister of Kerala, Elamaram Karim, and his senior officials to make a presentation to 40 possible Indian investors in Kerala. Not one of them invested. And I made a call to about 9, 10, 12, then I stopped calling because the answer was always the same. They said, we don't believe the promises. We're not prepared to risk our capital. We'll never get it back. As soon as we sink the money in, the unions will come, etc. And this is a communist government. I said, look, it's because they're a communist government, they have a stake in the success. You should be more worried if they were in the opposition, then they might want to embarrass the sitting government by creating trouble for them. They will help you. No. I said, but what about the talent? You've got all this educated talent in Kerala. And they said, yeah, but if we sink the same money just across the border in Tamil Nadu, these same Malayalis will cross over and work for us in Tamil Nadu. Yes. That was the answer I was getting all the time. So we have that to overcome, and I'm not going to suggest it's easy, but it can be done. For example, I have proposed that we should have an Investor Protection Act. No Indian state has it, but there are models of such acts in other countries in the world, where the investor will be guaranteed that other than normal business losses for market conditions, that no investor will lose money because of bureaucratic factors, political factors, union-related factors. And the state will essentially take out an insurance policy to reimburse the business. That could be the greatest security we could offer an investor to come in. That's one idea. I have a whole other set of ideas. I mean, I've written so many articles on all of this, you can Google them. But one thing I've suggested is we slash 2/3 of the regulations in Kerala. We're the most regulated, over-regulated state. And I've personally been the victim of some of this myself, just in the process of building a house. Literally every file needs 4 signatures. It can be done in 2 minutes, but the first one will take several weeks. Then by the time the file reaches the desk of the second person, he's gone off on leave. By the time he comes back and signs, gets the third desk, the fellow has been assigned to other duties. Literally a 2-minute procedure can take you 7 months, 8 months. This is typical of Kerala. And it's across the board. It's there in businesses. At one point, the communist government announced single window clearance for some businesses, and I applauded it publicly, and I was attacked by my party for applauding it. But I said this is so necessary. However, it turned out there wasn't a single window, it was a single portal. You submit it to one place, but thereafter it has to go through 25, 30 clearances of various different.
Though, right? 20 years before and now, isn't it better? You think it's getting...
I hope so, but it's not better everywhere. So this particular single window thing only applies in Kochi and nowhere else in Kerala. And even in Kochi, as I say, it's a portal and not a window. So the number of clearances has not gone down. It's just that it's the ease of submission rather than ease of clearance that's taking place. So there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I won't take up all your time because we do have to break up this. But bottom line is, Kerala will have to leverage its strengths. But at the moment, we're hemorrhaging our strengths. We have incredible human talent. We have a very good school education system, not as great a college education system as we used to have, but it's still pretty good. Everybody graduating from Kerala has qualities that are desired by people around the world, but these people are not, unfortunately, staying in Kerala. I've talked to so many young people, both high school and college, and thank you. And they tell me that they are going to leave. And I say, why? And they say, because there are no opportunities here. And one young man put it most pungently. He said, sir, what is there for me in Kerala? Isn't it now an old age home? So it suddenly struck me because, of course, I belong to that generation that's looking forward to retiring in Kerala. There is probably no better state in India to retire in than Kerala because the systems work, the hospital care, everything else you want functions, the environment is clean, the air is breathable, unlike many Indian cities. You've got so much going for you in Kerala. But what is there for a young person to look forward to in terms of career opportunities, everything else? I met a young man from Kerala who was going off to start a new IT business in Bangalore. And I said, why are you doing it in Bangalore? You can do it in Kerala. So many bright people here. He said, all the bright Malayalis are in Bangalore, sir.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a challenge I'm facing.
Yeah.
So I have a clear diagnosis and a clear prescription.
Okay.
Whether any doctor will sign it, I don't know. But at the moment, we have a leftist LDF in power. And we have a leftist Congress in opposition.
Yes.
And people like me with my sort of neo-Thatcherite views, or Reaganite views for Kerala.
Yeah.
I mean, in the global stage, I'm very much a sort of left-of-center figure by American politics or English politics standards. But in India,
You're
the left
on
has
the
moved
right.
so far
Yes.
left that I find myself right of center. But my ideas are, I don't think going to get the kind of, which is one of the reasons I declined an invitation to chair the manifesto committee. I had done that 5 years ago for the UDF. I said I'll do something different now, so I'm co-chairing the campaign committee instead rather than chairing the manifesto committee. But these are the ideas I hope to articulate in my speeches. Whenever I speak to Malayalis in this way, they seem to react positively. And those of you who prefer to listen than to read, just Google my speech to the Maraman convention 3 or 4 years ago. It's now got 500,000 views, which is unusual for anything in Kerala. And it's all about this kind of thing. It's all about how do we make Kerala a place where our young people want to stay rather than leave. And how do we manage to create in Kerala a future for the state and for its people. So I'm sorry for the very long answer to your question.
No, this is great. So, I mean, it's the perfect segue to our...
So that's on YouTube, the Maraman Convention speech. Yeah.
So it's a perfect segue to our last question, which is, you spoke about what you believe the solution is for Kerala. Now, if you were to kind of like put on your investor hat and put yourselves in our shoes.
I don't earn enough to invest, I'm afraid.
So if you were to think about, so if you look at us, we are a community-based organization. Culture is what brings us together.
Yep.
But increasingly, as we get older, we look back to Kerala and think, is there a way we can organize ourselves to kind of like commit to opportunities in the state? So when we get to the point where we can start making serious contributions to the state, how do you think we should position ourselves to be taken seriously? Because if we show up saying we are a community-based organization, there's a gazillion community-based Malayali organizations globally. What is it that we need to do to get our act together?
So my view is that, when you ask this question to most Keralites, they'll say, come and bring us your money and invest it in the state. That's only part of the answer.
Yep.
I think much more valuable thing you can do is to come back and talk, whether it's in, say, your family groups, and family meetings, in communities, in parties, in NGO gatherings, in Lions clubs, I don't care. Talk about how to do things differently. Talk about changing the mindset. You came and told me about how the curriculum in Kerala is so ridiculously out of date in your field. And there's a good example. I've been saying this, I'm blue in the face for 10 years. I've been arguing in Kerala, we need a higher education reforms commission, which engages not just vice chancellors and principals, but also students, also parents, also employers in the real world, who can actually sit down every year in a meeting and say, this needs to be updated, this needs to be scrapped, this needs to be changed. No one's doing that. And I put it into the UDF manifesto last time. We lost the election. The LDF promptly stole my idea. It was not in their manifesto, but they announced a Higher Education Reforms Commission. God knows whatever came of it, but nothing has changed in higher education. So here is something that I would love very much to see us doing. And I will say that that's just one area. It's true of everything else. It's true of regulation. It's true of business. It's true of any area in Kerala. You folks have seen how the real world works today. And you can come back and tell your counterparts, your equivalents in Kerala, you shouldn't be doing it this way, you should be doing it this. I know there's a usual resistance. This is the way we do it. Who are you foreigners to come and tell us? But it's the only way we can get Kerala out of the mess. We have to learn from the rest of the world. And fortunately now, there's such a large critical mass of Malayalis who've gone abroad. mainly in the Gulf, but also people like you here, Europe even has some, you can actually talk with first-hand experience of their success. And because you yourself embody that success, you can come back and say, this worked for us. We've done so well because this is how we were able to function. Can we function like this in Kerala? Short answer is no. Change it so that you can function here in Kerala the way we functioned in Boston or whatever. And try and encourage them. Talk about mindset changes. That's, I think, the one major thing you can all contribute. Seriously.
Awesome.
Okay, if I may just ask you, you've been in Parliament for 16 or 17 years now.
17, yeah.
17 years. And you've seen Kerala very in close quarters. Have you seen e-governance change? For example, I used to dread the time somebody comes to me with a file and then they move around the files in every office.
Yeah.
Have those things changed?
No. Not enough. I mean, there is some e-governance taking place. There are some things that can be done online. And unlike North India, at least by and large, the websites don't crash on you when you're trying to load. I mean, there's so many people in India frustrated because you have to now do something online that in the old days you could fill in a form and line up at a counter and hand it over. Now you have to do it online, but either the power goes or when the power is there, the website crashes. And people try 6, 7, 8, 9 times to upload a simple form and they tear their hair out in frustration. Kerala slightly better. But I think we may be ranked well within India for some of these things, but there's still a lot we can improve.
Sir, one question. You said like there needs to be a doctor, right? Is there a chance you may be the doctor in the future? Near future?
No, I mean, I'm very realistic about these things. And I don't think there's any prospect whatsoever of my actually holding executive office in the foreseeable years of my political career. And it's something that I don't enjoy saying because honestly, I came from the UN with a reputation of being a very efficient and successful administrator. I took on a task of reforming a supposedly unreformable department and I pulled it off and I did well. And I thought I knew how to work with people. I was not a bad manager. I knew how to delegate. I knew how to trust. I knew how to back my subordinates, but I also knew how to get things done. And I also knew how to impart a larger vision of what they were there for. All of these things are necessary to be an effective leader in an organization. But I came to India and never had a chance to do that. The only ministerial stints I had was at a number 2 and not a number 1 because I was too new in the game for them to. So I took a sort of protocol cut from having been rubbing shoulders with presidents and prime ministers, suddenly became a minister of state. But I thought, okay, it's a new profession for me. I can show them that I'm willing to learn the ropes and climb up. And then next time, but the next time never came. I've been in opposition for all those years. And now my time is running out. So I have no real illusions. As far as Kerala is concerned, there was a time for a couple of years when without my doing anything about it, I was leading in all the polls as the public's favored candidate. But that's also gone now. I'm no longer the leading candidate in the public. So there's no reason for me to assume that anybody will want to see me doing anything particular in this. But what I can do, I hope, is to be a voice. My biggest contribution at the national level so far, even while sitting in opposition, has been to move the needle of the national conversation on a lot of issues. And I have been able to have some influence on large numbers of people, including outside my party, through my ideas, my speeches, my appearances, my arguments, etc. So maybe I can try and do that in Kerala. And because ultimately I don't really care enough about, climbing up the greasy pole anymore. I would be willing to call a spade, and if my party is doing something wrong, I'm willing to call them out. I'm willing to give public advice. I'm willing to challenge them. So I don't particularly seek to be a thorn in somebody's flesh. That's not a great role to want to play. But if it comes to that, if that's necessary, I'll do it. But I don't really expect to be given the chance to execute any of this myself. It's simply the reality of Kerala politics is what it is.
We know your love for urlakirangu upperi. What else?
Idlis, urlakirangu upperi. No, I have a fairly wide range of South Indian vegetarian dishes I love. Malavisham, torans of various sorts, bean toran, cabbage toran. I don't want to give you a long and boring list, but I'm a very easy person to feed. So
Next time when you come, we can prepare all this.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yes, എനിക്ക് ഇഡ്ലിയോടൊപ്പം ഉള്ളി സമ്മന്തി തന്നെ വേണം.
That's the house to go to.
That's the house to go to, right. Everyone, please take her address. Sheri Appo, thank you all very much. I think I have to go off.
The last Saturday, I was at a Model UN conference.
Okay.
And I
it was actually at Tufts Fletcher School.
Mm.
And so I asked the chair for feedback, and he told me to fill my time with interesting details, and I realized to be able to connect things to personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, what were strategies you used to help you become the fluent speaker you are today?
No, just do it very often. There. Speaking is something that honestly all of us do all the time, but somehow we freeze in front of an audience, in front of a mic. So the only way you can overcome that is to speak, see what works, see when you feel you're losing an audience. But it's very easy to get a sense very quickly of whether you're striking home with your language, your delivery, your points, whether you're losing them, whether they're bored, whether they're not paying attention. It'll become apparent. You just have to do it often enough that it becomes second nature to you. And everyone is nervous for a very long time, but one day those nerves will cease simply because you've done it so often. You know pretty much everything that can go right and go wrong. And then you're really comfortable. I mean, politicians in Kerala will be making 12, 15 speeches a day. And they've just got used to it now. I mean, I reached a point where I often don't even know. I'll ask my staff in the car on the way to the event, what is this event about? And then I will get there and make a speech. And that sort of thing you'll get to when you've practiced, not practiced in the sense of preparing a text and mugging it up, but when you've learned basically what works, how you communicate your thoughts, what's your effective thing to say. I remember even in my college days, I'm talking about in the early 70s, before your parents were born probably, there was one guy from one of the IITs who was hilarious because he had a particular sort of nugget of about 3 minutes worth that he had completely mugged up by heart. And then whatever topic was assigned, he would somehow fit that 3 minutes into that topic. And once I had debated against him 3 or 4 times, I realized that one is coming again. It's the same thing. You know? So there are ways you can do that, but I'm not urging that. I think you should have if it's worth doing, it's also worth doing for yourself. Because in the process of applying your mind to new topics, new ideas, and new audiences, you are getting some stimulation. You're widening your horizons. You are training your mind to think differently. So don't do what this IIT guy did. Go with an open mind, have some broad orientations of what matters to you, how you approach a problem, and then just do your best. And listen, no one's always going to strike a home run, you know. I mean, similarly, you won't necessarily ace every debate or win every heart with every speech you make. But by doing it a few times, it'll come to you. What you've done well, where did you go wrong? If you were nervous on a particular thing and screwed up, why were you nervous that day? Try and remember, try and eliminate those causes of nervousness the next time. It'll come. Good luck.
Thank you.